Hi, I am Steve Rajkumar, author of The Faith Factor, The Art and Science of Faith. I have a few observations I'd like to make regarding the law of faith. Let's begin talking about, about gravity. The falling apple. We know in life, in nature, in the universe, nothing is really ad hoc. Even when we look at probability, we come up with the bell curve. And we found that if we were to roll a die or spin a coin, over a period of time, if we put it into the time factor, even what is supposed to be chance is not really chance, but it's governed by law. And eventually, if we roll that dice enough times, each number is going to turn up equally. If we flip that coin enough times, we'll have equal heads with equal tails. So nothing is by chance. When an apple fell, we're able to discover speed, acceleration, motion, time, space. We came up to relativity, and we had Einstein. We came up with the E equals mc squared. We're looking at life and starting from a simple observation, we're discovering elements of the universe that are present, invisible at the moment, but really existent. When we discover them, that's not when they existed. That's when we begin to understand how to make use of them over time. That's where we're able to contain the information in a textbook. And so some of us in life, we are at the point where we receive information, we take those things that are discovered, and we build enterprises out of those things. We create goods and services, we write books. But there are those of us who are at a certain point in discovering things about life. We are at the edge. We are at the point where things seem to be relatively invisible. And we talk about that in a while. So from the observation of the falling apple came a discovery of all the laws that were involved that caused us to move into the aircraft. We're able to understand speed. So we could have a helicopter. We have where we could fast forward a process, just as the apple fell at a fast rate and a leaf falls at a slow rate. We're able to have motion and control speed. We're able to have the helicopter being able to go forward, backward, much like the hummingbird. It's able to go upward, downward, discovering what is, discovering the laws, capitalizing on those laws, and benefiting from them. This is the amazing skill that we have as human beings. We discover when we come to the law of faith that there are many similarities, and in the law of faith, when we talk about the faith factor, the art and science of faith, we made reference to the law of gravity. The expert on faith used the comparison of a seed becoming a tree. So this is a simple, a humble seed, my art level. And this is a tree. For a seed to become a tree, there's the process of transformation. And that's where we have a graph in the book that talks about how this process takes place. From the law of faith, from the law of transformation, there are many things that we could gain from it. We could discover we have the visible and the invisible. So the seed to tree process tells us about visible and invisible reality. What we discover in science and technology, we are on the borderline of things that are invisible. Like for instance, even genetics, with a person who observed the pea plant and understand how things change in pollination. Coming to the borderline, that's where people who are the Nobel Prize winners, people who are doing research, they are looking at mutations, the behavior and irregular events of cells or whatever. They are at that point searching for the cause of things, not from the obvious that is really visible, but from things that we overlook, is seemingly insignificant. At this point, visible and invisible reality, they are real, and the more we discover them, they allow us to benefit from things that can become possible. We enter into that world where we have more things available to us, more things accessible to us. Another thing is that when we talk about the law of faith, the expert on faith who gave the example of what faith is, using the case of a seed becoming a tree, talks about possible and impossible. So just as the gravity that brought the apple led to the jet, the seed to tree paradigm, the law of faith, has such amazing implications that it sits where the natural is, where the visible is, and the invisible. It goes with the possible and the impossible. It's able to connect dimensions. It's going from the natural to the supernatural. So these are dimensions. Again, we're talking about a different law. And some of those things we understand naturally, like we do genetics, or when we look at agriculture, we understand things from that angle. But when we talk about the law of faith, the expert on faith was saying that same law that makes a seed become a tree has the potential, when we understand it, to connect dimensions of where things are impossible with things that are possible. It has the potential from that law, as we begin to understand it, to be able to move from the natural and connect a world that is the supernatural. It's able to deal with something. It's able to work with something, the dimension of something, and the dimension of nothing. Interesting. And even in terms of when we think of science today, we think of evolution. We're looking at the process of this seed to tree. And we're starting from the tree and we are backtracking step by step. We're coming to the seed. Even as we come to the end of what seems to be the natural, we have the idea of the Big Bang. We're talking about time and space, matter, speed. Things coming from into a physical dimension, from something that seems almost invisible in many ways, or inconceivable. So even science today is reaching into the sphere of accepting nothing or close to nothing becoming something. But it's not exactly, and we're now having a debate on that, but it's just showing that there's a law that is able to connect dimensions. And when we come under the law of faith, we'll discover it has other potentials. And these are remarkable things for us as we begin to look at it. Not because we do not understand something, it doesn't mean it does not exist. Like we say, the apple had realities that were invisible, that were powerful. They were there before. And so the law of faith has amazing potential. Those that we can test and see as the seed gradually becomes a tree, and those things that we could hardly touch, understand, or fathom. When we think of the potential of the seed to tree, so here's my little seed again, and the tree, we're saying this is the natural. That's the law of faith moving in a slow way. So it could be from slow, and it could be done quickly. Because we haven't understood all the potential of it. Just as we're able to take a falling apple and create a rocket, moving at speed, much faster. Just as we're able to take the spoken word and fit that into electromagnetic frequencies and send it around the earth many times in a second. The fact is, we discover the principle. The law of faith has amazing potential as we begin to discover it. And using the natural, we begin to enter the supernatural, the known to the unknown, what is to what is not. Interestingly, one of the things about the law of faith, it is able to fast forward a process. So, the fact that something could come from nothing, which is close to what science believes, instead of a big bang, there was a big statement from God when He said, "Let there be." It's going beyond those forces that we see. There must have caused a source. There must be something before that. If there is something, then there was nothing. And the law that helps us to understand that, just as we understand chemistry, how water is formed through the law of chemistry, the law of faith helps us to understand how nothing can come into something. It's able to take the slow process of a tree, a seed becoming a tree, or it's able to use the fast process where a tree could begin to happen before the seed happens. Sounds unreasonable when we use the paradigm we have today, but when we understand the potential of this law, we discover some amazing things, and it's taking us into a world that makes us excited because it functions as a law as we begin to understand it. The process could be fast forwarded. In terms of time, the present, the past, and the future, they are all one. According to the law of faith, the law of faith deals with the now. Everything is in the now. We set time, but according to this law, it doesn't have limitations to that. It can work in the process of time, but it can extend out of the boundaries of time. Do you find that interesting? Present, past, and future being in the now. We're saying that we could fast forward. We could fast forward, or we could rewind. Things could happen in an instant. A tree could die in an instant. It dies from the root up in a short space of time. That's the potential when we come into this environment, and that's amazing for us to see. Replication is another interesting dimension. Instantaneous replication. We think of the guy with a withered hand, with a healthy hand, the other healthy hand, and in an instant, as he stretched forth this hand, it became exactly as the healthy one. Where did the bones come from? Where did the cells, the blood vessels, the nerves, the flesh, tendons, everything? It happened where something is replicated in an instant. We may say no. But when you think of it, even looking at that screen, when you think of electromagnetic frequencies flowing from somebody who's sending information, going up to satellites, blasting into your country, coming through from your service provider into your house, in that short space of time, a movie, these things are all broken into bits and pieces, transferring to you instantly into an image. Think of it. When we think of that speaks in the natural. We think of the law, and the expert on the law of faith is saying it has natural paradigm to the law of faith, but it goes into a sphere that links with the impossible. You find that interesting? So for instance, Jesus was able to take loaves and fishes, and he was able to make that become replications in an instant. He blessed it and he broke it, and it was continuously multiplying, that fed thousands of people. We understand, if we understand the law of faith, we have an explanation for why such a thing could have happened. It doesn't have to be a fable. If we could do these things with nature around us, if we could fast forward processes like motion, what about the law of faith? When the experts spoke about the potential of the law of faith. Let's think of it, and when we think of our situations, every situation is matched with a resolution. And so there is transformation. The law of faith is transformation. But the law of faith is also translation. So here we have, when we talk about replication, if you have to have a fish, to have more fish, you have to have the fish have babies, young ones, and they have to grow. Then they have to be caught, they have to be cooked. But here you're having it happening instantly. So that's not in terms of transformation in that sense, but we could see translational potentials. Things can happen. Enoch was translated. So we could think of the sick becoming well in an instant. The deaf can hear. The blind can see. We could understand miracles. So that's where we're going into when we think of the art and science of the law of faith, and we look into the idea of the invisible reality as we look at that curve. I want to thank you very much for taking time to look at what we're talking about in this presentation, and really look into understanding what the law of faith is all about. It's amazing. It opens life with lots of hope for us. We can be successful. There's a plan, there's a future, there's an amazing destiny for you. Life has hope by the law that's available to us, where the supernatural can intervene in our circumstances. When we could hear the instruction of what we need to do, of the next step we need to take, that's going to initiate a process that activates the law of faith from dimensions that are invisible to us, that are unknown to us in the natural, a different platform with amazing and unthinking possible. Remember to join us at www.thefaithfactor.ca. We have great things for you. We want to hear from you. We expect mighty things to happen in your life. Remember, if you have faith, like a grain of mustard seed, nothing shall be impossible for you